Welcome to the Digital Intellect, bringing you the latest news from around the world. On June 15, 2025, Egypt made a move that stunned the world. It halted the flow of the Nile River. The Aswan High Dam's colossal gates were closed, cutting off water to over 100 million people. This was no accident or disaster. It was a deliberate, high-stakes political act. The Nile, lifeblood of Egypt and its neighbors, began to recede, threatening the stability of an entire region. The world watched in disbelief as the river that built civilizations was silenced. Egypt's drastic measure was a desperate response to years of failed negotiations over Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam, which Egypt saw as a threat to its very survival. The shutdown was a gamble to force global attention, a cry for help that risked plunging the Nile basin into chaos. In Cairo, crowds gathered on bridges, filming the shrinking river. In the Delta, farmers watched their irrigation canals dry up in panic. The president's announcement was clear: the old rules no longer applied. A new, uncertain era had begun on the banks of the world's most storied river. The two-week crisis that followed would test the resilience of Egypt, its neighbors, and the world. To grasp the gravity of Egypt's decision, you must understand its bond with the Nile. For over 5 millennia, the river has been Egypt's source of life, carving a green valley through the desert and sustaining empires. The Nile is woven into Egypt's culture, economy, and identity. Its floods once dictated the rhythm of life, enabling civilization to flourish. Today, the river provides over 95% of Egypt's fresh water, irrigates millions of acres, and supports industry and tourism. The Aswan High Dam, built in 1970, was meant to secure Egypt's future, storing water for droughts and generating power. The idea of using the dam to stop the river's flow was unthinkable, a tool of life turned into an instrument of fear. To threaten the Nile is to threaten the very heart of Egypt. The shutdown shattered a relationship that had endured for thousands of years. The government's announcement hit Egypt like a thunderclap. In Cairo, panic spread as people rushed to buy water and food, stripping supermarket shelves bare. The river, once a symbol of stability, became a source of dread. In rural villages, farmers stared at empty canals, fearing for their crops and livelihoods. Rumors and misinformation spread quickly, deepening the sense of crisis. The government's reassurances rang hollow as taps ran dry and anxiety soared. In the countryside, the shutdown felt like a betrayal, a self-inflicted wound with devastating consequences. Trust in the authorities crumbled, replaced by fear and anger. The social fabric began to fray as people questioned the wisdom of their leaders. Egypt was united by a single overwhelming fear: what if the water never returned? Why would Egypt risk so much? The president called the shutdown a necessary evil, a final warning to the world and to Ethiopia. Years of failed talks over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam had left Egypt desperate, fearing for its water security. Ethiopia saw the dam as its future. Egypt saw it as an existential threat. By halting the Nile, Egypt hoped to force global intervention, showing the world the stakes in this water war. The message was clear: Egypt would not let its lifeline be threatened, no matter the cost. The consequences were immediate and brutal. Water rationing failed to meet demand. Families queued for hours at public trucks under the scorching sun. Tempers flared as survival became a daily struggle. Agriculture collapsed, fields withered, fish died, and boats sat stranded in the mud. The tourism industry vanished overnight. Saltwater from the Mediterranean crept into the Delta, poisoning soil and threatening long-term food security. Wetlands dried up, and the river's ecosystem suffered. Communities fractured, some united by hardship, others torn apart by desperation. The government's grip weakened as chaos spread. The shutdown exposed just how fragile civilization becomes when its lifeline is cut. Egypt's action sent shockwaves across the region, turning a diplomatic dispute into an international crisis. Ethiopia condemned the move as environmental terrorism, vowing to press on with its dam. Sudan, caught in the middle, felt betrayed and faced its own water shortages. Trust between neighbors collapsed, and the risk of conflict soared. The Arab League and African Union scrambled to mediate, fearing a wider war. Global markets grew jittery, worried about the Suez Canal and regional stability. The world realized that Egypt's relationship with the Nile had global consequences. The threat of a water war was no longer a distant warning. It was at the doorstep. The world could no longer look away. The UN Security Council called for urgent talks, declaring water a fundamental human right. Images of parched fields and desperate crowds filled global news, making the crisis impossible to ignore. Major powers urged Egypt to reopen the dam and pressed Ethiopia for compromise. Experts warned that weaponizing water set a dangerous precedent for other shared rivers worldwide. The Nile shutdown was a wake-up call. Water scarcity and climate change could spark future conflicts. The crisis exposed the limits of current international agreements on shared resources. The world faced a stark truth: cooperation over water was no longer optional. After 2 agonizing weeks, Egypt reopened the dam, claiming its message had been heard. Relief swept the nation, but the damage was done: ruined crops, poisoned soil, and broken trust. The shutdown, meant as a show of strength, revealed only shared vulnerability. The crisis forced a shift from confrontation to cooperation, as diplomats began to talk of shared responsibility. The spectacle of a dying river proved that a zero-sum game would leave everyone a loser. The Nile's stillness became a permanent warning. Unilateral action over shared resources is a path to disaster. Only trust, negotiation, and mutual respect can secure the future of the river and its people. The Nile flows again, but its silence will not be forgotten.